everyone, before we keep going here, I need to tell you about our teammates at Darby Communications. Like I've been telling you, if you run an outdoor, an endurance, or an active lifestyle brand, there is no better PR and digital marketing belay partner or drinking buddy than Darby. They can help your business reach new heights, and they might just keep you from falling on your ass. Since we started working with Darby, more and more people, and this is an important point now, guys, I want you to hear me on this, more and more people have reached out to us here at The Rock Fight because of that messaging. Look, guys, I'm dead serious. If they can help us, they can help anybody. Hit them up at darbycommunications.com. Do it today. Welcome to The Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin, and today we have some big news to come out of the outdoor industry when it comes to public lands, and then an old friend of the podcast stops by to say hi. But before we get to that, if you missed Monday's episode of The Rock Fight, go back to hear outdoor industry insider Owen Comerford and producer Dave and I dig into the topic of the moment. That topic is tariffs. That is an episode you don't want to miss. And be sure to come back this Friday for what is our usual Wednesday episode. Justin Hausman will be here to get up to something good with me, I'm sure. And lastly, support Open Container, the newest show on the Rock Fight Podcast Network and hosted by the legend himself, Doug Schnitzbahn. It's a great podcast. You can find Open Container wherever you're listening to my voice right now. Head over there, click follow, and of course, follow the Rock Fight as well. Hey, stick around. We'll be right back. So normally on Wednesday, Justin Hausman and I talk about stories that come out of the outdoor community, but today I'm proud that the Rock Fight is part of the announcement that the Conservation Alliance is spearheading called Brands for Public Lands. Over the past few weeks, over 60 outdoor businesses and brands have worked to establish a coalition to make the outdoor industry heard during this time of threat to our sacred public lands. And today, those brands are making their presence known. So we have two things for you on tap for today's show. First is Executive Director for the Conservation Alliance, Paul Hendricks. He joins me to talk about the announcement, how Brands for Public Lands came together, and what happens next. Hey, and just a heads up, we had kind of a weird connection, so if you hear some clicking during my conversation with Paul, that's not your headphones or car stereo. Don't worry, it's not you, it's me, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. But wait, there's more. After I chat with Paul, I'm then joined by Mountain Gazette's Kyle Frost, who last week wrote a really interesting piece for his newsletter, Here and There, about nature as a politically partisan topic. He comes on the show, and we get a little deeper into that conversation, as well as touching a bit on tariffs. Longtime listeners will recognize Kyle as a returning champion to the podcast, and we are always excited to hear more about his insights. Just a banger of an episode for you today, so let's kick it off with my conversation with Paul Hendricks of the Conservation Alliance. All right, we're here with Paul Hendricks, who is the Executive Director of the Conservation Alliance. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks for having me on here today.
So how long have you been in the Executive Director chair now?
So I got into the position in August. So what is that, 9 months-ish or so?
8 months.
So,
any regrets at this point?
Is my board of directors listening to this? I should probably...
Like, I thought I was going to be protecting wilderness.
Yeah, right. No regrets at all.
Good.
I'd say, it's an uphill battle right now on a lot of stuff, but hey, we've got to dig in. We've got to do it. And I think we're going to come out of what we're facing right now better, stronger, and more refined. So I think
awesome.
It's a great
love it. We have to maintain a positive attitude because
totally.
there's a lot happening in the U.S. right now with our new presidential administration. That let's remind everybody, not yet 100 days old. Right, we haven't even crossed that threshold yet.
Haven't crossed that threshold.
And as our president, he's been rolling out his agenda. The outdoor community has not been spared from the policies that will likely be damaging from an economic, conservation, recreation point of view. But today's a big day on that front. I think today's almost a day a lot of us sort of in the know have been waiting for and wondering what was going to happen here. So shortly after this episode drops, a coalition of outdoor brands and groups will have started talking about how the outdoor industry is going to respond or is responding to our president's plans, with the Conservation Alliance helping to lead the charge. So, Paul, can you just give us an overview of what you guys are doing, what you've been up to, what the leaders in the outdoor industry have been working on for the past few weeks? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, you alluded to it. There's a lot coming at our industry right now, and tariffs being probably the biggest one that a lot of people are focused on. But, if you shift the glance a little bit, the backbone of our outdoor industry is nature, right? the places where our gear, our apparel, our provisions, guiding services, photography, it all takes place on ecosystems on our public lands, right? And if those ecosystems aren't healthy, our economy isn't healthy, right? So
Right
now we're looking at nature being under significant threat right now, and specifically the amazing natural resources that we call our public lands. Right. So there are a lot of conversations, signals, and actions right now that have come from Washington, D.C. That are, if they come to fruition, if they're allowed to come to fruition, would have devastating effects on public land system and therefore on the $1 trillion outdoor recreation economy that relies on it. So that's the backdrop of what we're kind of looking at right now. And we can get into some more details later of what we're talking about there. But, TCA and our members, we've been engaged in a lot of conversations over the almost 100 days now. But a couple of weeks ago, we had a call with our good friends over at Patagonia, and in particular, Ryan Gellert was really adamant about mobilizing the outdoor industry around protecting our public lands and our economy, right? And so over the past few weeks, we've been working behind the scenes with a number of brands, another number of nonprofit partners to stand up what we're calling Brands for Public Lands. And today we're launching that coalition, which is a group of over 60 businesses that are really stepping up, really stepping forward and protecting our public lands, which we know is our most valuable asset, right? It's the backbone of our economy, and it's time to supercharge the industry and try to make our voice and our presence known with elected officials, with our customers, with our employees, that we are here to protect the public lands. And so we're launching that today.
Are there any details in the message? Is it more to say, is this the kind of like, the line in the sand? Like, hey, we are going to be vocal. We are going to be pushing back against your agenda. Or are there any kind of specifics that are going to come along with that message, or is that to come?
Yeah, that'll be to come. I mean, I think right now the launch of it is to make our presence known, right? There's been a lot of nonprofit coalitions, tribal coalitions, others who have stood up and pushing against that, but the business voice has been a little bit in the backdrop, a little bit in the background. And so what we're getting out today is saying we are here and we are adamant about protecting our public lands. And we have two specific actions that we are taking place. So we had some sign-on letters that got sent over to DC this morning, which we can dig into overall. But it's meant to be a message that is signaling to people that we are here and we're serious about protecting these lands. And when things come up, we're going to dig deep and we're going to protect landscapes, we're going to protect laws and everything like that.
This is really good news, one, and even if it is more of just kind of an announcement, because this is Trump 2.0, I think, is shaping up. We've talked a little bit about it on the podcast, but to be different than Trump 1.0, right? Obviously, the narrative is he's much more emboldened to kind of get his agenda out there. He's much more like kind of has a plan of what he's doing, and he's surrounding himself with people who are enabling him to do that plan. Versus the first time, there were some checks and balances along the way, and I think as I kind of reflect back now in the first 100 days of this. And the way things kind of came out of the gate, it was noticeably kind of quiet on the industry front, which at first was a little, I don't know, I think we did talk about this in the podcast, like, hey, what's going on? How come nobody's saying anything? Ryan did break the ice with that, with his op-ed piece in Time. And then, but now to kind of understand maybe, listen, it was a little bit more of like, we needed to kind of get our ducks in a row too, before we kind of just charge out of the gate. I mean, the first time around, Bears Ears gave us that sort of like, knee jerk, like, hey, like, hands off, Dick. Like, what are you doing? No, like, and we were able to kind of like that was a real kind of outdoorsy sort of, touchstone of the first time around. This time, though, with as far reaching as everything has been going, and you mentioned the tariff conversation has been dominating and will obviously continue to dominate things for I'm sure for a long time. I think it's really important that we are a little more organized and a little more thoughtful in what the approach is, so that it can have an impact and not just be a lot of lip service. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. You pointed to exactly what we're dealing with right now. And, I feel like there's a little bit of two tactics in terms of the messaging that we're seeing coming out of DC. One is the flood the zone type of thing, which is just create chaos, get people to react to everything so that no one is strategic. And we wanted to make sure we didn't do that. Mm-hmm. The other side of things is that there is a lot of the conversations we've been hearing a little bit about is largely held in secret right now. And so some signals come out, they're retracted. And so what we're trying to, figure out what is actually going on. And as a business coalition, knowing we want to really be strategic with where we're engaging, how we're engaging, where we're using our political capital, we wanted to make sure it was the time that we knew exactly what was coming down the line, and we could really launch ourselves out there and take specific actions around the biggest threats to our public lands. And we're going to continue to do that.
So what is coming next? Like what are the, what should people be looking for? Like what would you anticipate as this kind of thing unfolds, like for people to kind of be keeping an eye out from the brands for public lands? Great alliteration, by the way, got to get the rhyme scheme going there,
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, so I'm deep into Dr. Seuss these days.
Want to make for good merch. Who's going to make the merch? Is there a fight behind the scenes? Or who's going to make the merch?
On that one. Yeah.
Everyone wants to make the merch. Like, sorry, guys. Where's your factory located? Who has the lowest tariffs? That's who gets to make the merch.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, when we think about what we're doing coming down the line, I think there's probably some short-term things and then some long-term goals, right? Overall, I think when we think about the short term, we've got an acute set of tasks in front of us, right? And that is to specifically defend the bedrock of the public land system and specific landscapes. So we are currently pretty involved in what we are calling the public land sell-off issue, which is this larger movement of conversation signals and things through all 3 branches of our government that we've seen, which is indicating that people have an appetite to sell off our public lands to address our national debt and to balance the budget and offset tax cuts, right? And that is a nonstop issue for us, right? That's a red line. We are not going to allow that to happen because that could devastate the public land system overall, and that's irreversible actions that would happen. So that is a near-term thing. And this morning we submitted a letter to Congress to signal our direct opposition towards selling off our public lands to meet these purposes, right? So over the next month, Congress is involved in what they call the budget reconciliation process, which is where a lot of that can happen. We're going to be pushing really hard on that. We're also seeing indications, and some stuff has dropped over the past week here, that specific landscapes are being opened up to industrial extraction. So we know some things that have happened. We know some things are going to happen, right? So that's a lot of it's the national monuments that become, unfortunately, the political football these days, right? You've got Bears Ears, you got Baj Nohabjo Itakukvene, and you have the Grand Canyon there. You've got Chuckwalla in California. These amazing landscapes that were designated under Obama or Biden, and those are being shifted. He's also got amazing iconic landscapes that are the backbone for community-based recreation economies, Boundary Waters, Thompson Divide here in Colorado, Alaska, which are looking to be opened up for mineral extraction. And we've got that stuff coming down the line too, which we have to dig into. So there's certainly no shortage of issues that we're going to be responding to.
Yeah, and to your point, what you said earlier, you have to the vigilance with which this has to be approached, and kind of the thoughtfulness too, right? We talked before we hit record. We were talking about how last week, was tariff central. Like we had just, I told you how we had just finished recording the episode that ran on Monday, where we got really deep into the weeds on tariffs, and come back to my computer and find a bunch of urgent messages from folks like Fitz Cahal, the Dirtbag Diaries, like, hey, like there's going to be a vote ASAP on protecting public lands. And it just was like, wait, why? Usually there's a build up to these things. Like, well, this is the topic that we're talking about. And eventually we get to this point where people are voting on it. This was just like, hey, we just got done kind of trying to figure out like how we're going to continue to, operate as an economic driver, as an outdoor industry. Well, hey, stop what you're doing and start posting people to call their senators, especially in these key states, that they vote for this, this resolution. And I imagine there's just going to be a lot more of those sort of like chaotic moments in our future.
Totally. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the world we're living in right now. And there's going to be constant engagement opportunities. And, I think the fear is that people get tired and, have some attrition towards fighting back. And I totally get that overall. And I think that probably alludes to one of like the longer term vision for what we have here is we can't keep living in this world where public lands where laws are flip-flopping back and forth, not only does it create, tired people like you and I, Colin, but right, you can't build economies around these if you don't know if
exactly
the trails outside your coffee shop are going to be protected. And so
Right.
what we really want to do is reframe the narrative around the economic vitality of our public lands, right? So at a macro level, right, the existence of promise of these lands in perpetuity has built a thriving $1 trillion economy, right? Every year, visitations to our public lands breaks new records, right? So it's a growing economy, it's a growing industry overall. And so if we talk about the economic yield of these lands,
yes,
it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
It's growing, it's sustainable, and especially if you can look beyond that 4-year time frame of electoral cycles, right? It builds long-term economies that can be a foil for the boom and bust cycle that have unfortunately devastated a lot of the communities out here in the West, right? So
right.
if we can tell that narrative, if we can really hit that forward and say, this is an economic conversation here, we've got a chance to cross ideologies, demographics, geographies. And that's what's probably going to make the big long-term change, so that we're not finding ourselves in a situation like we are right now, again, where we're just on constant defense and flipping back and forth on tactics.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I was thinking while you're talking, like the $1 trillion number that gets thrown out a lot, and there's a lot of ways to nitpick that number and be like, well, there's 90 plus categories and all the things, right? Like, what does it really mean? And yes, it adds up to this. And that's a very inside baseball, outdoor industry kind of conversation. Where it is not a debate is in the public lands conversation. Like that is the thing that holds that $1 trillion number together across all those categories. And that is leverage, especially for the economically minded, policy setters that we have currently right now in Washington. So it's like that. That is, to me, that is the leverage that we almost have. It's like you're threatening a serious contributor to our national economy by going after this. So
yeah, an economy that goes across divides, right? It's hikers, it's climbers, it's anglers, it's hunters, it's RVers, right? There's our people across the nation use our public lands for provisioning, for recreation, bringing their families. People around the world come to visit those, and they're so accessible. And if we lose that, it's going to be devastating to an economy.
So what resources exist right now? If people look up what you guys are putting out there today, like what would you encourage folks who are listening to this to do? Yeah.
So, we're building a rocket as we're flying it in a storm right now. but we really prioritize action, function over form right away. So this morning, we submitted 2 business sign-on letters, one to the administration, one to Congress. We got that going. We have a press release out there. If you want to learn more, we've got a link to a survey that we can probably put in the podcast notes, where you can get involved, indicate if you want to be involved. You can email me. We're soon going to be setting up more formal resources like a website and all that type of stuff. But we'd love to just get in touch with anyone who wants to be involved. The more, the merrier here. Our power is in our collective numbers, in our collective economic numbers. So we'd love to have you get involved. So email, click the link that we'll maybe drop in here. And
definitely be in the show notes.
Onward. Sounds great.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, Paul, let's have you back on the show again to continue to talk about this, maybe have a longer conversation about some things, but happy to be part of announcing this to the world. And all we can do is keep our chin up and stay positive and keep pressing on this stuff. It's all we can do.
Yep. You betcha. The antidote to depression is action, man. So I appreciate you helping to get our word out there, what we're doing. And it's going to take everyone right now. It's not a time to sit on the sidelines.
Awesome. All right, buddy. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Thanks to Paul for joining us today. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back with Mountain Gazette's Kyle Frost. All right, folks, let's talk about a game changer, literally. If you're a brand or retailer in the outdoor industry, think of Endeavor like the ultimate power-up for your sales game. This platform is designed to level up retail associates, giving them the XP they need to master your gear, sell more, and rack up rewards along the way. It's like a cheat code for better sales, making sure your products don't just sit on the shelves but actually move. Why is this valuable? Well, trained and motivated staff sell way more gear. Brands using Endeavor, like K2 Sports and Smith Optics, have seen better sell-through, stronger brand engagement, and real data insights on what works. And here's where Endeavor gets really interesting. It's gamified. That means learning about products and earning incentives feels fun and not like homework. But there's also a couple of other power-ups you'll want to consider. First is their partnership with Locally, so online shoppers can instantly find a knowledgeable staffer in a nearby store ready to seal the deal. Second is an option known as freemium, where you can launch brand assets, push newsfeed posts, and coordinate rep clinics. And with Endeavor's pay-as-you-go plans, you can take sales contests, education campaigns, or collect staff insights collection programs all out for a test drive. The bottom line, if your retail game is feeling like it's stuck in easy mode, Endeavor is the upgrade you need to unlock next-level sales, max out your team's knowledge, and beat the boss when it comes to customer experience. Head to Endeavor, that's endvr.io, to learn more today. All right, it's been a minute, but Kyle Frost is back on the Rock Fight. What's up, man? I just should have gone back to look. I think it was it last summer? The last time you were here? It's been a minute.
It has been a while, and I feel like you've made a lot of promises to guests in the meantime about green jackets and just, the 3 Timers Awards. I feel a little left out,
Well, you were more of a regular contributor. I guess now you really are now in the guest role. You probably should be up for the 5 Timers Club. I mean, you're already, you've got to be in, right? You came on at least 3 or 4 times, in the history. This might be 6 or 7 if I went back and counted.
It's got to be something like that, but it has been a while. I think it was before I moved to London, so that was
definitely was before you moved. You
September.
Were prepping to move. So, where is your van, by the way? You did your van build out while you were coming on the show too. What's going on with the van?
Yeah, the van is sitting parked in front of my sister's and her husband's house
in Orange County.
So when I go back to Colorado, no, in Colorado.
Oh, she's in Colorado. Okay.
Yeah. So we have actually had to go back enough this year for weddings and all sorts of things. So it's been useful to have and just show up, pop in the van and, hop around for a week and then head back to the UK.
That is nice. And versatile. You can sleep in it, all that stuff. That's great.
Yeah, haven't really been sleeping in it. Been taking advantage of friends, family members, and that sort of thing. But it's still been a useful vehicle. A little bit of a money pit, but you know how those things are.
It's all right. Now you gotta ride in the States every time you head home. Now it's great. All right, man. Well, let's dig into it. So your most recent Mountain Gazette newsletter presents an overarching theme in which the title is "Can Nature Be Nonpartisan?" I think there's a generally agreed to idea that the outdoors are kind of a topic where there is no political divide. I mean, that idea has come up a lot around here. Actually, we've had Jess Turner from the ORR on talking about the Explore Act and how it passes through Congress unanimously. But your newsletter highlights that you don't really need to peel the onion too many layers deep to find examples where there are clear partisan divides in the outdoors. So I thought this would be a really interesting topic to kind of dig into. What was the origin for you? Why did you decide you wanted to dig into this?
I mean, I think the initial starting point from this was actually less is the outdoors nonpartisan, and more it was a couple of situations that I noticed happening in pretty rapid succession recently. I start a lot of my writing from a perspective of, looking at things that seem super one-sided or seem too good to be true or seem extremely slanted one way. Yeah. And then just actually digging in or hell, just read the actual article instead of, looking at the headline. And then when the article references a research paper, read the research paper. So for this, I think it kind of got packaged in the sense of how complicated modern conservation and environmentalism is, both for progressives and for conservatives. But I had 3 main examples. The first of which I'm sure you saw, and I'm sure a lot of listeners saw or shared, was this Instagram carousel that very well designed, beautiful picture, white text, quotes, talking about how Trump is going to cut down 100 million acres of old growth forests, basically.
Yep.
And look, I get how social advocacy works. I get how marketing works. I get how attention works. There's a whole conversation to be had about how the conservative movement has utilized or weaponized in a lot of senses, misinformation and that sort of thing to get their goals. But like, that headline is just not true.
Right.
And the executive order that he signed basically instructs agencies, I believe it was to like increase logging capacity by 25%, and find ways to like expedite approvals and all sorts of things. So like, logging in general is a complicated topic in and of itself. Like I'm working on a piece about that. I'm really trying to get some perspectives from forestry officials and from logging companies as well, because logging happens on public lands right now. I think it's about 3 billion board feet a year. By law, they can do up to 6, and there's reason to be concerned with this administration about the way they're approaching this. Some stuff came out, I think it was yesterday. They kind of like followed up from the Department of Agriculture about how they're going to zone, for lack of a better word, public lands to like do this kind of expediting and that kind of stuff. But there's still local land managers involved. Like there are still going to be legal hurdles. And there are, just because something has been like put in this zone that is an overlapping relationship of like high wildfire risk and a kind of nebulous designation as like non-healthy or diseased or whatever, doesn't even mean that logging companies are interested. Like I seen a bunch of stuff today that said like people are really worried about the boundary waters. I'm sorry, like there's not going to be a logging company that's going to go into the boundary waters. I just do not believe it. Like the infrastructure isn't there. The public perception is terrible. Like they're not cutting down redwoods. We already get most of our softwood from tree farms in the Southeast. Like,
yeah, if nothing else, it muddies the waters, right? I mean, it's like we are such a hyper critic. Like we are so hypersensitive to like one specific detail. I feel like this is like a human nature thing that like, and now it becomes this one thing, right? It's as opposed to like the broader message of like, hey, we should be concerned about this. How do we solve for it? It's like, no, I read that it's going to be this one thing. Like, well, you didn't read that. That's not accurate. It should be this. And it's like now the debate becomes about the message that was sent versus what the thing is we should actually be debating. I mean, I'm seeing this. I know we're going to talk about tariffs in a minute, but the tariffs are the same thing. It's kind of like, well, you're not paying attention to this. And this one guy said this one thing. It's like, yeah, but you got to take so much. It's such a broader topic that everyone just wants to drill it down to the one thing they feel like they know about, as opposed to, hey, let's actually talk about what this really means, how it's going to be deployed, and where should our concern lie and push back. It's so much more nuanced. And I mean, and it's obvious that's what the Trump administration wants to do as well. They want to sow this chaos, knowing that this is how people are going to react. But yeah, man, it's just like, it's, I don't know, it's rough. So it's definitely rough.
And it just makes these issues very polarizing when there are like honest conversations to be had, where, if you talk to a lot of people that are involved in forestry and that sort of stuff, like these kind of conversations that force the polarization make it harder to do actual needed forest management, because it turns public perception completely away from logging as a possibility. There's like I think it's called proforestation, which is the idea that we should never touch forests. Like they should be self-managed and completely human hands off, which, as far as I understand from the research that I've done, I'm still in the midst of this, is a challenging one, given that humans have been heavily involved in forest management for thousands of years. And there is some element that is useful to mitigate wildfires, to burn growth, and manage the health of these places. But like you said, I mean, it's a complicated topic, and the whole point of that was that I don't think that particular post was super productive.
Yeah, I think it's like all of a sudden, like you said, where it goes from this, which is maybe even if it's well intended, to, hey, did you hear they're laying waste to the entire redwood forests of Northern California? It's like, no, that's not what's happening. Like this is just how these things perpetuate themselves. Like, so, like, stop it.
Yeah. But that kind of brought me to the second one, which is REI.
Yeah, well, this is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, REI has made itself a little bit of a punching bag for a lot of extremely valid reasons lately.
They certainly have.
Layoffs, unions.
A lot of unforced errors up in Seattle,
That's a good way to put it. And, I think what happened here was that they were one of the signatories amongst 33 other organizations on a letter from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is a conglomeration of a bunch of associations in the outdoor industry, supporting the nomination of Doug Burgum for Secretary of the Interior. This happened in February.
I was January 14th. I was on
January, even earlier than that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pre inauguration.
Yeah. And a month or two later, it kind of made its way to social media. People really latched on to the fact that REI was a signatory there. This was when the layoffs started happening. And people are still mad. Every time REI posts something positive, negative, if they posted a whole thing about how they support public lands and yada, yada, everything, boycott REI, you guys support cutting down forests and, defunding national parks and all that kind of stuff. And guys, these kind of letters happen in every single administration, no matter who
100%.
wins. These are big companies that want to remain in the room. And for what it's worth, Burgum, we don't like the Trump administration. I don't like the Trump administration. But as a conservative politician leading this position goes, pretty
not
middle
bad.
Of the line. Not bad.
Started he's done a lot for conservation.
Yeah, he's done a lot for conservation. He is a conservative, but a reasonable one. And I think we've just gone too far.
That's the thing. I talked to, I'm sure I've said this in the pod before. I had at that moment it's funny. I did exactly the thing that we're highlighting that we shouldn't do, because I get those press releases, right? So I got all from the ORR, came through mid-January, saw it. I'm and I kind of got that makes sense. They would endorse the Secretary of the Interior kind of thing. It made sense in the moment. Didn't really look through who else had signed it, just saw the release. And then all of a sudden, when early February starts to come up, did you see this thing? Did you see the names that were on it? You're oh my God, how could they possibly support the Trump administration in any form? Yeah. And I talked to Ken Ebersol and he's look, man, we need a seat at the table. What good does it, do you see? I mean, any administration would want you to be supportive so that you keep that seat at the table. A Trump administration, the guy who's basically making decisions based off of loyalty tests. What do you think's going to happen if we say, no, you can't have your guy, especially like you just said, a guy who is, as conservatives go, about as good as you're going to get. And so the REI of it all is I get it and principle, but it's a lot like the first point about the forest. It's it is you gotta look a little deeper of why this is. It still can mean that they're anti-union and REI can, all these things can be true. You don't have to just bag on them for this, and you can still be mad at them for not supporting the unions in their stores if you want to. But it's guys, leave this one alone. What do you want them to do?
Yeah, and it's just is this really where you think your effort should be directed at this moment? Do you really believe that at its core REI is supportive of these things? No, but it has some weight as its place in the industry, as do a lot of these other organizations.
Absolutely. And they're a $1 billion company.
I know for a fact, a lot of the people involved with that letter have been in Washington, since then, talking with people. And that's how that kind of brings us into the next thing here, which is that there was an organization announced a couple of weeks ago called Nature is Non-Partisan, founded by a combination group of conservatives and progressives, basically with the idea being that of pushing policies and compromise and working together on outdoor policy, and that should supersede party allegiance and stuff like that everyone wants positive outcomes.
Was this like the reels or TikToks I saw where it was like, "Hey, I voted for Trump, but I believe in the outdoors." Was that
It
them?
was. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it got a pretty mixed reaction, both from both sides. Conservatives that thought it was ridiculous, liberals that thought it was. I mean, there was one newsletter I read that basically described it as like the "Make America Healthy Again" like movement, which is very problematic, and a Trojan horse for like conservative politics. I mostly think at its core, like they haven't done anything yet, so we're kind of over prescribing their level of influence. But I looked into it quite a bit. There's some concerns. There's they have some people on their board that are kind of like Gen Z, culture war YouTube kind of people.
Okay.
That I assume are there because for just reach and communication, but like no real history in caring about environmental issues or the outdoors and that kind of stuff. And so to me, that's like that just seems like bad optics.
Right.
But at the same time, like there's a lot of, there's an ex-director of the Sierra Club. There's I think Interior Secretary. And I think that both sides are like kind of like wary of this. Just illustrates like that there are issues that we're going to have to work together on, and there are compromises that are going to be made. Like, there's a lot about far right conservative issues that I don't agree with and other people aren't going to agree with. There's a lot about left-leaning environmentalism issues that I don't agree with and that a lot of other people don't agree with.
Right.
But if we want to get anything done, like we have to be able to have conversations about this stuff. And that's the hard part.
So the response to this was a very American response. Two sides were outraged and a bunch of us in the middle being like, I don't know.
Yeah, being like, come on, just like, let's just see what happens here. Like, I think there's compromises that are going to have to be made. There's a huge elephant in the room that the Trump administration is going to push through ridiculous policies, regardless of who Doug Burgum is, regardless of whether people, conservatives and liberals, are aligned on progress and conservation and that kind of stuff. But we got to see what happens.
Well, we're going to talk about the tariffs in a second. I mean, that's kind of largely been the reporting, is that he's kind of operating on his own on this. So it's like, Doug Burgum could be the most like liberal left-leaning Sierra Club conservationist of all time. It's like, what do you think he's gonna do in the Trump administration? Like, Donald's gonna decide what he wants to do, and that's the way it's gonna be.
I mean, I think the scary thing is we just don't know.
You just don't know. That's it. And that's part of the plan. I guess when you look at the three examples you cited, and they're great, and I think, this is why I do really enjoy your writing, is to kind of give a little of that, like, well, I mean, and actually, Hausman did a thing on this recently too, where he kind of got into the Explore Act, and he heard from some people who weren't as supportive of the Explore Act as others, because there is just this sort of, it's the outdoors, so everyone's going to be on board with it. It's like, well, it's not that hard to find examples where there is some divisiveness. What's your takeaway? Like, what did you have a conclusion you came to, kind of like looking at these as like, either a path forward or something to kind of the people just need to be mindful about?
I mean, I think the thing to be mindful about is that you have to think about things more critically, and you have to be willing to compromise. Like, there are a lot of progressive policies when it comes to environmentalism that are problematic. Like, there's a lot of like left-leaning politics that looks for silver bullets, and anything less than the silver bullet is not worth doing. And I think, like, the logging situation is like a good example, right? Like, there are a lot of both brands and advocacy organizations that put out the perspective that logging is just bad, period. And that permeates into the public consciousness. That can cause problems. I think that there's you get similar conversations with regards to things like nuclear energy, with regards to, permitting when it comes to renewable energy projects and that kind of stuff. Like, that's kind of, in some cases, not all. I'm not saying regulations are bad, but in some cases they've been used to prevent, solar farms from being built, or, the application of renewables or higher density housing and things like this. And I think just being willing to look critically about, like, internally and recognize that you don't have to give up your values. Like, I'm not giving up what you believe in here, but like, let's think about things, and let's think about what the other people are saying. Like, other people don't want to have dirty water. Other people don't want to sell national parks. But there's conversations to be had.
I thought we were supposed to come out like fully formed individuals who knew everything and are hard and fast in our opinions from the time we're 17 to the rest till we die, right? Isn't that the way?
No. The more you know, the less you know.
The more you know. There we go. We'll throw back to the 80s TV thing. Well, the last time you came on the show, we were just starting to you were just, like we mentioned, you were just getting ready to relocate over to London. You've been there for a minute now. Through the first part of the Trump second term, you definitely were ahead of the game on kind of writing about tariffs. We waited a little bit to wait and see how it kind of came out, but we just did an episode of that on Monday. I guess I just want to start with, even before we even get the specifics of the tariffs, how's it been observing the chaos, the tariffs and beyond, everything else we're talking about? From how's it been observing that from afar? Are you ready to move home yet, or are you kind of happy being outside of the country right now?
It's a unique perspective, that's for sure. The takeaway, I would say, is that there's not a two sides coming from the UK and Europe here. They are 100. Everyone I talk to, everyone in the news and everything, it's basically just like, what the hell is going on with the US? They've abdicated literally everything that they've stand for. There are people I know that are canceling trips to the US. Like, this is like a serious thing that I think a lot of Americans are maybe underestimating, like how on a dime almost that, perceptions of the United States have changed like extremely drastically. I think that the travel thing is actually going to be a larger problem than has even been reported yet. We're already seeing that with Canadians. I think it's going to be the same with the Europeans and people from the UK. That's another economic problem, and that's not just like the kind of anecdotal safety, border crossing kind of stuff. That is like, we don't want to go to the US anymore.
Yeah, it's a form of protest. Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely been unique.
Do you wish you could claim this was the plan the whole time? Like, I see this coming, guys. I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here.
No, definitely wasn't that. But I'm happy to be here for the moment, and we'll see how long we're here for.
How's the British accent coming? Are you trying to
no, never.
Let people not hear your American accent? So
the only thing I do that Sarah gives me a hard time about is when I say sorry, like when I'm like passing someone, or like you bump someone like on the tube or something like that. Yeah. I kind of go sorry, or I kind of like do like a little bit of an accent, because I have a weird aversion to being immediately labeled as like an American tourist or something.
Right.
Especially in London. Like, no, I live here. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't want to like have a weird anxiety about getting put in that bucket with people.
I don't think that's weird at all. I think that's smart.
I don't like affect like an accent when I'm interacting with the world, but
but you create some ambiguity, right? Like, maybe that guy's Canadian. Maybe we don't know. We're not exactly sure. He doesn't, not necessarily American. That's great. That's pretty funny. Speaking about the tariffs, so we did do a deep dive on Monday, and like I mentioned, you had written about it, but we were chatting about it with Owen Comerford on Monday's episode. what are you keeping your eye on the most, as this sort of thing unfolds? I mean, especially now, maybe that you can reflect back on what you wrote last month and kind of see as it's unfolding, what is it that you are keeping your eye on as you go from the, what you formed to what you wrote in your newsletter, and then now that it's actually happening, what's interesting to you as we look at this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing for me is how like small brands are going to be able to react.
Yeah.
The big guys are going to find ways to manage inventory, and they have a little, they can put more effort into non-American markets and stuff like that. The smaller cottage brands don't have that leeway when it comes to inventory and pricing and all of that kind of stuff. So, I think there's reason to be worried there about what happens.
Yeah.
In general, I think it'll change the makeup of what kind of product people are trying to move. Especially kind of Q1 to Q2.
Right.
But again, I think you guys touched on this as well. Like the tariffs could be gone next week. We have no idea. Like people have no idea how to I guess Owen obviously comes from like a heavy retail background and like a deep understanding of this, and like a lot of your listeners do, but like the amount that uncertainty changes how much product you're going to order, what you're going to price it at, which categories of product you're trying to move, like which brands you're going to order from. Like all of this stuff has just completely blown up in the last month, and nobody really has an answer of what to do. And I think some people are going to make bets one way and get totally screwed, and some people are going to make bets another way and kind of write it out successfully. I don't think anyone knows what those two options are right now, though.
No, and I referenced it just kind of just like a off the cuff remark on Monday about how kind of like shades of COVID, and kind of behind the scenes as we're planning out next week's episode. I think we might kind of dig into it because, listen, what are the common themes here between when COVID hit and what's happening now? It's uncertainty, and people have to make some decisions based off of stuff you can't really account for. I mean, there's a really strong reality, no matter how this shapes up, that the industry ends up back in the same position it was in 18 months ago, like inventory problems, all that stuff, right? Because people are going to have to where do we buy from? What do we have? Okay, there's shortages here, so people are buying things up that they're short on. Well, now we over order as a result. I mean, so I don't want to spoil things we're going to talk about in the future, but it's kind of like it's not unlikely because, to your exact point, the big worry here is the lack of clarity. If this was truly just like, this is the way it's going to be, then like, okay, how do we work around it? And there's going to be, doesn't make it right. But if you make a bunch of moves today and then not even next week, like 30 days from now, this is a slow moving process to make shit, man. It is not easy to just make the decision. Oh shit, we shouldn't have left Vietnam. Well, now we got to go back. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, and if it again, like I said, it's just like people are going to make bets. If things go forward in Vietnam and they get their stuff figured out, but China doesn't, but Thailand does, but Singapore doesn't. Like, I don't know. Some of the guys are going to be able to move stuff around, some of them aren't, but it's kind of a mess for everyone.
Well, and also lost in the tariff conversation at the end of last week is the fact that the Senate did in fact hold a vote on the topic of selling off public lands. So that was fun to find out. 10 seconds after we learned about tariffs, that oh no, we're going to do this too. So let's just keep it going, the chaos train going. The vote was to establish a deficit neutral reserve fund relating to preventing the use of proceeds from public land sales to reduce the federal deficit. And it failed with only 2 Republicans crossing the line to vote in favor of it. I exchanged some emails with a person close to these proceedings who told me, I'm not really surprised that with all the fury and letters, not a single R was converted to our side. That's not sitting well. Where do you think this conversation's headed? I mean, it kind of relates a little bit back to some of the things you were talking about at the beginning, but
yeah,
I mean,
it's certainly scary, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think some of the framing around this is a little bit confusing because the vote that actually happened is they voted to not make a resolution to to explicitly prohibit it. It does not mean that they are going to do it. It just continues to leave the door open, which
it sounds like it was kind of a table setter sort of vote to see who would kind of come over to protect public lands, right?
Yeah. It was just the two senators were from Montana, pretty heavy public land state. Kind of often has some more progressive leaning politics when it leans on conservation in public lands often. I do think that one of the interesting things about this is like one of the reasons that they say they're going to do it is to sell public lands in gateway areas to build affordable housing. Again, we can't believe anything people say. You give an inch, they'll take a mile.
Yeah.
But I think it is an interesting thought experiment to be like, okay, we know.
Get ready for the emails, Kyle, before you say it.
I know. Hey, I think it's an interesting thought experiment, right? Like, how much would you give up so that federal workers that work in places that are highly impacted and have nowhere to live or have extremely high living costs have affordable housing?
So is Aspen the first one in on this?
10 acres, 20 acres,
go. Right, yeah.
But I mean, but it is one of those things where there are places that are kind of like capped in. I am by no means an advocate of selling public land in any respect, but
right. It's just who's doing the selling, right? It's kind of like you just can't trust anybody because I thought it was supposed to be affordable housing, and it's like a high rise, with a bunch of businesses.
All of a sudden,
Exxon opened a building.
You sold 1 million acres, and you're like, and I think that is the problem here is that there is no history of good faith and and trust, and therefore me and no one else trusts anyone to make a reasonable decision on things. I don't know what'll happen here. Obviously, they've floated this a couple times. I believe it may have also been in Project 2025. I mentioned it. It was mentioned in some other documentation. I'd have to go look up where it was. But there was mention of it when Trump was talking about creating a sovereign wealth fund. That he would potentially use public land sales to populate the sovereign wealth fund. So I think it's a bad idea. I think it's troubling that no one was willing to, or not enough people were willing to cross the aisle to prevent it. But there's not a lot we can do but watch.
We get people to cross the aisle. It's going to take them thinking like they're not going to get reelected because the economy's in the tank. Like that's all this comes down to. Like I saw someone even this morning posting things that I was in agreement with in principle about, the climate change and how that's getting left behind in all of this. I'm like, yeah, but we are in full on, we'll take a look at the damage when we get through this mode. It's kind of it's
the whole climate change thing is a conversation across not just government, but private industry as well. Like how many climate commitments are currently taking the backseat because every brand is like, hey, we got to figure out our own house. We got to figure out how to stay in business. And therefore we are dropping climate goals. We are not investing in XYZ to figure that stuff out. I do think one interesting thing that may come out of the tariff stuff if prices go up is an increase in resale and secondhand. So I think this is potentially an interesting inflection point for the circular economy and that sort of thing. So
that's interesting. I didn't think of that.
People like Archive and what Tersus, is that the other one?
Tersus.
Yeah. I think this is potentially an opportunity for them. If consumers are going to spend less because prices go up and because the economy goes down, and brands are looking for any way to capitalize on retaining brand equity and engagement and just life of product and that kind of stuff. So I think that'll be interesting to see if we see an increase in that kind of activity in the market.
Dude, that is That's this is the first time I heard anybody suggest this, and you're absolutely right. Like, what do we talk about all the time? Is how much stuff we have. Like how we don't really need to even make any more stuff. There's enough stuff to kind of go around. Well, guess what? You don't have to pay tariffs on the shit that already exists in our secondhand stores. So hey, gear trade. Yeah, get on that messaging.
The Boulder Sports Recycler is going to be popping.
Yeah, right. Wow. All right, man. We can wrap it up there. Yeah, where can people find the newsletter? Where do you want them to seek you out?
The easiest way is probably hereandthere.club. There's a big old sign up button. You can also find it by just subscribing to Mountain Gazette in general. Anywhere on the website there is going to subscribe you to Here and There. And nice. Yeah, it goes out every 2 weeks. Feel free to find my email online if I've been too controversial today and send me an email.
We'll link it all in the show notes. No, we'll definitely put the subscription link in the show notes.
Always happy to have conversations.
All right, man. We'll get to have you back on again soon. Definitely not as long as it's been. And I know you maybe have a couple things in the works, and maybe we'll see you again here in the not too distant future. So appreciate you coming on as always. Love your insights. It's always great for the Rock Fight listeners to hear from you. So thank you so much.
It is great to be back. Been too long.
All right, that's the show for today. Big thanks to Paul Hendricks and Kyle Frost for joining. We want to hear from you. Send your feedback on this and every episode of The Rock Fight to myrockfight@gmail.co. If you're listening on Spotify, you can leave a comment right there on the episode. The Rock Fight is a production of Rock Fight LLC. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. And here, like always, is our guy, Chris DeMakes, who you can have as your own personal tour guide of the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas in early May. So check that out. And if you do, ask him about the Rock Fight fight song, which he's going to sing right now. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.